Deputy Jones, you're up. Folks, if you need to take a restroom break, just go ahead and go. We're just going to need to make up some time. It's going to be added to backup, yes. Oh, did it? Okay. All right.
Deputy Superintendent of Operations Scott Jones, who's driving? Greg? Okay, so if you'll pull up the monthly budget report, right, ma'am? Monthly budget report, yes. Yes, okay. I don't know what else I'd be up here for. But
Yes,
yeah,
monthly
okay,
budget
monthly
report.
budget report.
And then discretionary funds.
Right. So I can attest to the Utah State Board of Education is in a sound financial position, able to meet all its known obligations and commitments. So we're early in the fiscal year. Actually, October starts the second quarter of fiscal year 25. So we've completed the first quarter, and all indications are we're on, once again, a good glide path, able to meet all our financial obligations and commitments, all the known ones. We did provide last month a tool or a different view of the budget, more of an interactive. So if we could pull that up again to show. Yeah, I think so. Guessing. Oh no, yeah, it's the COVID one. Yeah, right there. Yeah, sorry. So here's the format that we've introduced to you. We feel that this is a value add and a lot more user friendly for both you and the public to basically, without having to scroll through multiple pages. This is a typically 1 to 4 page report. You just simply select any one of the buttons that you're interested in on the left-hand side for any of the programs, and the system will take you to that particular status of funds for that particular program, offering detail on expenditure rates, where we're at revenue-wise, et cetera. Madam Chair, subject to any questions or concerns about the report or the monthly budget, or the budget as a whole, that concludes this portion of the agenda item.
I see no questions. Go.
Okay.
We can move on.
Next up is the discretionary report, so if we could pull that up. So as you recall earlier, board members and the public, the board took action on the discretionary funds that were recommended to you by the Finance Committee earlier in your day. So this report will get updated to show that the board has approved what you did approve earlier today, but if we could go to the report, please. A key takeaway with this is even with the amounts that you approved earlier today, I orient the board members and the public to the upper right-hand corner. This is where you can see where there's remaining balances of funds available to you as board members to use at your discretion, of course, approved or at the direction of the board. But there will be funds still available even after the approvals that you made today. So as we update this and move together through the fiscal year, just please keep in mind that we'll continue to update you on the status of funds in the upper right-hand corner should you have a particular project that you are thinking would be a good and allowable use of the funds, and staff will certainly support you. Subject to any questions or concerns on this particular report, on the discretionary funds report, Madam Chair, that concludes this portion of the monthly budget report.
Member Wood?
This is actually on the budget report. Can you explain to me what dedicated credits are?
Sure. Can I phone a friend and have Deborah come up here and help with that? But as she's approaching the bench or whatever here, so I will tell you that the dedicated credits are a source of revenue that is not typically from a appropriated source in the sense of, well, it's appropriated, but we get it from another entity by way of, whatever agreements we have with them or what have you. So Deborah?
I think she is not in the,
That's great.
she's not
Okay,
behind you.
so, yeah.
You could forward that
Okay.
information to us.
Okay,
It'd
yeah,
be great.
no, that's basically the gist of it. Is a
Okay.
dedicated credit is something that we get, like the liquor tax or, those types of things.
Great example.
Say again? I would have to check on that. I believe the federal mineral is not necessarily a dedicated credit.
Okay.
It's a revenue source, so. Is it federal mineral level? Yeah. Go ahead, tell them what a dedicated credit is.
Deborah Jacobson, Assistant Finance Director, or Assistant
Something, so.
Assistant Superintendent of Operations. Dedicated credits are basically collections, like whether, if we charge fees for any kind of an activity. Sometimes we charge fees for conferences that we put on, things like that.
It's a liquor tax, so.
Liquor tax is
Is it
considered.
See, I was right about that. So liquor
Yeah.
tax is a dedicated credit
Federal
because we
mineral-
collect that, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Federal mineral lease is its own funding source, its own revenue source. So.
Yeah. Does that answer Board Member Wood's questions, Madam Chair?
Yes.
And we do appreciate the question too, thank you. So that others have that same question too, so.
Okay. And I see no other questions about the discretionary funds. So now it's time for the October economic update.
Right, and if you could recognize Sam, Yuri, and Dr. Rodriguez, Dr. Nestor.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Mr. Yuri and
For
Dr.
this-
Nestor.
Yeah, for this particular
Sure,
presentation.
sure. And I'm excited because this is the second time I'm hearing this, so I'm hoping to understand more than 20%.
And while Dr. Rodriguez is coming up to sit down, we also presented this in the finance training to the field on October 1st. Well, actually, this is an abbreviated version in the interest of time. So we did go much deeper with the field. So what you're about to hear here has also been shared with the field as an update, so.
All right, thank you, gentlemen, for being with us today. Whenever you're ready. Is your light on, Dr. Nestor? There you go.
Hi, good afternoon, Board. Nestor Rodriguez, economist. Nice to be here. How's everybody doing? Hope your year's going good. Go for it. Yeah, okay. Hi, everybody. So I'm going to go over the economic update, and so go ahead and go with the slide there. So what seems to be of major importance is the preliminary year-end estimates we just got from both tax and from the LFA, but the finance section. They present us with TC23s and summaries. I'm going to go over that, just general and income tax overviews, projected ongoing funds for 2025. And then really quickly, there's a lot to go in there about the macroeconomy. But I'm going to focus mostly on the economy, on the general economy, which would be the gross domestic product. But more importantly for most, I bet, would be the interest rates, where interest rates are going and inflation. All right, next slide. So these preliminary estimates, as I mentioned earlier, come from tax and LFA Finance, or budget division, and their budget reports. There's details there. I make a quick WP to income tax fund comparison and then projected ongoing funds for fiscal year 2026. Slide. And so in summary, what we've seen is overall revenues were at 11.4 billion. Year-over-year increase, year-over-year change, there was an increase of negative 0.8%, so just a little bit negative than the target rate, which was negative 0.4%. Slide. The income tax fund revenues were 6.226 billion, which represents a year-over-year change of negative 3.0%. Again, a little more negative than the target, which was negative 2.6%. Slide. And then this is really important to sort of look at, is that if we compare, we're looking at 22, 23, and 24, and those are the fiscal years. the numbers. And what you're seeing is 2022 was a bonanza, if you will, relatively speaking, compared to the downturn in 23. You see those last 3 months, April, May, June. That's actual data that's listed, publicly available on both websites I mentioned earlier. You see that trend compared to 24. It's moderating. It looks like it's going down. It's becoming less negative. And they do mention, I believe in the last summary, that income tax change had moderated considerably in June of this year. Next slide. And so you could barely see this here, but I'm just comparing. That green is suggesting, as they do too, in that revenue snapshot, above target range. I'm assuming the bounce back from what had happened during COVID, these revenue levels being so high. Compare that to the next slide. In 23 is where we see this decline. And what it seems to look like is this was the low point. This is what we're seeing. Because when you compare those numbers to, next slide, 24, those declines become less negative. And although they didn't make their target, it would suggest that things have moderated. To be optimistic, maybe we've passed the bottom. But again, and if you look at where that first arrow is, we're hitting, and we did this in 2023 too, we're hitting the middle of that range. That's a range that they're forecasting. We're kind of in the middle of it. So we're not too low, we're not too high. We're kind of just right, if you will. And it happened in 23 too, although albeit they were more negative. Next slide. So these numbers are just looking at changes, real changes. So these were adjusted for inflation. So the websites, both websites are great with regard to data. Forgive me for not being able to change in R, the program I use, in the sense of making this in sequential order in line with the fiscal year. What you're seeing is they're reporting. They don't report. It seems to vary from year to year, but in July and August, seems that when they submit the same information, sometimes it shows up as July, sometimes it comes in as early as September, so forgive me for that. But if you see the trends there in September, you see that low point, that is basically when the collection cycle sort of is updated anyway. It begins before that. And it goes all the way up to the end, to June. And so what we're seeing here is the general fund, which encompasses sales tax. I would point your attention to, these are real prices, and what I'm seeing here, I believe is, you see that dip there. That's what those arrows are. That was when we had that high inflation event, if you will, in 2022, and that slowdown. And what I want you to note here is, if you see this is the general fund. Next slide. You'll see the income tax fund. There was a more drastic change there. And though there's been a bit of recovery, again, note that this goes, as it increases through the year, this acutely affected the income tax fund compared to the previous slide you saw. And then last but not least, in the transportation fund. Next slide. You see that it really was so drastic, it dropped below the average and those are months for all those years. In other words, that first September or October number, all the Octobers from 2019 to 2024. And so they all seem to correspond to that 2022 event, if you will. So just out of curiosity, if you're thinking in terms of tax revenues, what kind of happened. Next slide. And these are just WPU changes versus, it's been pretty steady, about 5-6%, or 6% year to year. Next slide. Compared to income tax fund changes. And again, 2022 was a big year. That 53.3% change was because of how low we were before that. So it behoove us, I think, to think along the lines of that with something we won't see again, and it was just because of how bad things were before. Next slide. And this is just a graphic showing the changes between the two. The average WPU change is just under 6%. The average income tax fund change was 14%. I think a lot of it's weighted because of what had happened 4 or 5 years ago. Next slide. Yes. Income tax fund. Sorry. I'm sorry, I'm maybe going too fast. It's just there's just a lot of slides here, and maybe you have questions. Here we're looking at projected funding, and we're looking at what the past tells us based on what's already happened. Sorry. And so in the past, we had, in fiscal 24, we had requested, the board, USB had requested about $1 billion. The legislature, we have this data because this is what happened, appropriated just under $1 billion. In 2025, again, the WPU value inflationary adjustment and the statutory enrollment growth ongoing, those are by statute. We had requested with that 590 million. The legislature, and that's what that right arrow is showing, appropriated $796 million. So, and the ongoing, the statutory enrollment. The request was for $451 million. The year before that, the request had been $857 million.
And if I may, Madam Chair, if we could just pause on this slide. I think this is, you know, all of it's important data and important information. But if we look at, you know, you'll hear terms like deja vu, or, you know, the trends are similar to what we experienced last year before going into the legislative session. There might be some correlation of what we can expect as far as new money for public education. So are there any, Madam Chair, through you, are there any questions or concerns about this? Because of all the deliverables or key takeaways, this is probably the most important slide for you as decision makers to be informed about, you know, what the trend is, or what we're seeing, and how that, in association or conjunction with the WPU data that we gave you, what we can likely expect to see as we, you know, enter into the legislative session. So
I don't see any questions. Every board member can articulate what the slide says. I'm just kidding. Member Straight.
Yes. Do we have any idea what one-time money might look like, or is that just not possible at this point?
Sam Uri, School Finance Director. We do. If we can go to the next slide. Okay. So next year, our projection for one-time money is $509 million. That is coming from the Public Education Economic Stabilization Fund. And based on those formulas, that's what we're projecting, is that $509 million. Obviously, the part that we're most interested, or that has the most variability, is the ongoing piece of it. So I'll let Nestor explain. We have a low and a mid and a high range estimate here, and I'll let him continue.
Thanks, Sam. So, very important to understand, there's a lot of details here. We are available for you. There's a bigger spreadsheet. It's just, you won't see it. I mean, you won't be able to see. This is cuts of that spreadsheet. So we're more than happy to share it with you at any time, so you could see really where this is, this bunch of stuff, that bunch of scenarios are on one spreadsheet, if you will. So we assumed the WPU increase. We assumed the 10% because of what had happened the year before that and the year before that. And statutory enrollment, we assumed to stay the same at 48 million. So the total would be 225 million that by statute would have to be accounted for. And so we gave ourselves three scenarios: 200, 250, and 300, sort of equidistant from each other and the like. And so it at a new ongoing projected of $200 million, the additional spending available would be a negative 25 million. And that would mean that the legislature would have to find somewhere else to cut with regard to, in order to meet what's in statute. In the next scenario, next slide, which is 250, there's a little bit more wiggle room, if you will, of 24 million, but that's again assuming that new ongoing projected is a little higher. And again, this is in line with, we're keeping everything the same. In other words, the inflationary adjustment was 10%. The statutory enrollment growth was 48 million for all three scenarios. So the next slide, at 300, then the additional spending available would be just under 75 million dollars. Questions?
Questions?
Yes.
What was the inflationary adjustment last year? Do you remember?
3.8%.
Yeah, it was 3.8.
And it's 10, you're projecting 10%?
So a 10% increase on the 3.8.
No, so can you give me apples to apples? So what was the increase last year, not,
So it's a 5-year rolling average.
Okay.
I can pull that up.
that just seems really high. And
It is.
And you're right. And if you go 2 slides back, are you on?
So, yeah, it is a little bit higher. The year prior, I believe, was 3.4%. So we went up to 3.8. We are actually projecting, and we just pulled the core CPI number today. So we're actually projecting that it may be about 3.9% for fiscal year 26.
Oh, that's a lot different than 10%.
Well, so it was 10% off of 3.8, which would be about 4.1.
I can't
So
do
it was,
that.
so the 3.8%, which we had last year, it was a 10% increase to that 3.8%. It was the assumption
So
here
y-
with the
So
the
10%
projections.
increase last year also. You said 10%
Just
from-
a small 10% increase on the 3.8%, on the
3.8%.
total inflationary factor, which was $161 million.
Okay. It just, again, without making all those leaps, it seems high, and maybe it's because of the unrest in the country and the election, and maybe
It's a little
that's-
high. We've actually seen it come down. So our number from our last number was 4.1% in September 2023. September 2024, we're looking at about 3.2%. So it's coming down a little bit. But just due to that 5-year rolling average where we had 6.6% in September 22, that's why it will still go up slightly to
Okay.
to about 3.9 is what
belabor
we're
it.
projecting.
That's
I
one
want,
piece, too.
Yeah, I want to make it clear for the board that all of this is projections at this point. Nestor's doing his best with his crystal ball that's mostly spreadsheets, but so I do want to make that clear, but we are trying to give the board kind of an idea of what to expect, and just based on the revenue, we may not have a whole bunch of available revenue to go much higher than that 3.9% on the inflationary increase. So
Thanks.
do we want
Member
Say
Norton?
something? Yeah, Member Norton.
On that 5-year rolling average, so it's been going up. Has it been going up all the 5 years that we're using now? Has it been going up all of those 5 years, or have we started into the adjusting back down a little bit?
Yeah, great question. So it has 6.6%, again, I mentioned in September 22, then down 4.1, again to now is 3.2. So we would see it kind of be pretty similar for the next few years, just depending again on.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I think it's important to note, though, too, that we do back out energy and food from right? And so those are typically your 2 highest inflationary components, I guess, of inflation overall is, energy prices and food prices. So that is backed out of the equation, I guess, to arrive at what the discretionary amount percentage is, so.
Right.
Very good. Do you have more?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Oh, no,
If I
it's
may,
okay.
I'm
Just-
sorry about that. Yes, as a matter of fact, with regard to Board Member Straight's comment, we do the opposite, if we will. We do reason to exclude food and energies because they're volatile components of inflation, to get a sort of a more steady number. But with that said, next slide, sorry. In line with that discussion, it's maybe important to look at what's happened in the general macroeconomy. This is all publicly available data, whether LFA has got a great budget that or report that I wait for in the middle of September. They use publicly available sources and then from the federal government. As far as the macro economy is going, according to our data, it's suggesting that the economy is growing at a steady rate of about 2 to 3%. We will get a third quarter preliminary update sometime in the middle of this month for the third quarter just passed. Next slide. All right, so this is just graphics. I really wanted to highlight one particular slide so you could keep going. Sorry about this. Right here. With regard to interest rates and or where inflation is going, we are in the throes of what we call the expectation cycle, if you will, or stage with regard to inflation. What we've seen, and you see in this data here, 2022 was an extreme economic event with that high inflation. We hadn't seen rates of inflation like that in approximately 40 or 50 or so odd years, the 70s and 80s. So that was, relatively speaking, for many, an extreme event, and we're coming down from that. Forecasts have been in line. Expectations are more the issue now. You need not look any further, and there's a graphic I have here for you, than what's happening in the media, the unrest. There's a couple of strikes right now, work stoppages. This is where we are now. We are in this inflation expectation. And what it is basically, in a nutshell, folks are demanding higher wages to make up for the loss associated with what's happened a couple of years ago. So if you look at the next slide here, thanks. This right here, that hump in the middle is where you see inflation. That purple line was higher than wage growth. That is from the past, it's lagged, but that's what you're seeing now, is although wages, the growth in wages has surpassed inflation recently, you're seeing it just with work stoppages, but the like in general, folks are trying to recoup that. And so that's what's happening now. As far as inflation goes, it looks like from the data that we're seeing that inflation is starting to go back down to that 2 to 3% range, which is what the Federal Reserve, the central bank of the United States, aims for. Coincidentally, that lines up with what you're seeing with the economy, its growth rate. It happens to be about 2 to 3%. This is sort of this happy medium that exists between the economy, inflation, interest rates, etc. So the overall goal with regard to interest rates in this interest rate cut cycle that the Fed is going through now is to be in that 2 to 3% overall long run range. And with that said, I think there's a whole host of more information there, a lot of slides, but I just to save time, if you want to ask anything else, by all means please do. But if you want to ask also, this is available on the website as well. But there's a whole host of other slides, housing, labor in general. If you have any questions, please ask. But yeah, I'll stop it here to save time, and if you have any questions.
There was one slide that I remember seeing, and it talked about the Utah economy. I think it's one of the ones you skipped. That was a good slide. Can you go to it?
Sure, go back to that slide. And so something else to keep in mind, you passed it, and this is in general. There are pockets in the country where the economies tend to be resilient, and Utah seems to be one of them. We saw this with COVID a few years ago. In the relative scheme of things, the Utah economy, everything went down, but it wasn't as bad as some other places. Some other parts of the country were rather drastic. And LFA, alongside myself, and others have suggested that this is what we're looking at now. It seems like this economy is very resilient compared to other parts of the country. So something to keep in mind.
Yeah. Sam, will you go to slide 32?
I think it's
32.
I think.
That one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That one.
that's what I'm iterating.
Yeah.
But we saw it with COVID, and we're anticipating seeing it again in that relative to other parts of the country, it seems like this economy locally is very resilient. The Federal Reserve is aiming for what's called a soft landing. This is a very large economy, that being the U.S. economy. To sort of control it with a gauge, if you will, if that's the interest rate, the Fed funds rate, is very difficult. And so you can imagine trying to maybe steer a locomotive with a mouse. That's kind of what it is in a way, in a manner of speaking. And so that's what this soft landing is, to sort of land the economy softly, getting rid of inflation, and at the same time continuing to grow. So it seems the economy in Utah seems to be positioned to fare better if the situation tightens. In other words, if inflation reignites, which a lot of folks are not anticipating, or if the economy slows, which is what is a major concern of the Federal Reserve now, which is why we're in this interest rate cutting cycle, because they would like to lower the cost of capital to help companies start to to invest, and anyone for that matter, any invest and the like. Does that answer your question?
Thank you, yes.
Mhm.
Thank you so much. I just want to say that you both have a remarkable ability to make those slides understandable. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. Just one more thing.
Oh, sure.
I'm gonna supersede you, Scott. You don't know. I would like to, on a regular basis. Sorry, I'm jumping the chain.
Yeah,
here.
no, you're good.
Chain of command. I would like to, on a regular basis, so these aren't as shocking to you, meet with you on a regular basis. I know we got the holidays coming in session, but even then, maybe March or April, because there are developments. The TC23s are actually very good for a publicly available source of information, to give you updates of what's going on macroeconomy and locally too. I would like to do that. That way, you're more up to speed of what's going on. If that's okay, obviously I have to clear
That-
with these two.
That
but,
is
yeah.
wonderful, and
Yeah.
we're having
That's great.
Sybil put that on. Make a note of that. Thank you.
Okay,
Yeah.
you're welcome. Thank you.
Next up, we have USIMS.
USIMS, yes. So if I could swap out these great players and pull some more players out of the bullpen for USIMS, that'd be great. Katrina, Madam Chair, if you're okay, if I call their names up and just have them. come.
please.
Katrina and the program managers, Tim, Don, Mark, Jared too, if he's up here. Jared's better dressed than I am today, so. Do we have enough chairs?
I'm missing one chair. Does he have Jared?
Oh, okay.
Jared can just, it's fine.
He has to sit on my left. So, Madam Chair, members of the board, at the PEA meeting next week, we're providing a USIMS update as well to the Public Education Appropriations Committee of the Legislature. There's a lot of questions about where we're at with USIMS, what the investment amount is thus far in it and what return on the investment we're getting. So we're going to demonstrate all that to you here as concisely and quickly as possible, but as substantially as possible, because I know there's a lot of questions and there's some interrelations between USIMS and the ongoing discussion about the benefits outweighing the costs of one SIS across the state. In the 2022 general session, then Senator Andrig and Representative Lisenby ran an amendment to the school information management system that basically extended the due date for the capabilities and requirements of the USIMS system to July 1st of 2024. So without going into the details about what those requirements are, because we're going to demonstrate that we meet the July 1st, 2024 requirement or capabilities of USIMS, I would call the public's and the board's attention to code 53E, as in echo, 3-518. There you can find what the legislative or legal requirements or code requirements were for. Am I like Donald Trump mute Mike here? So, okay. So thank you. No, that's all good. I'm good. So, okay. So the 53E 53E 3-518. Thank you. So that's the applicable code. I also would call your attention to, even though there were requirements and capabilities that we have on July 1st of 2024, even in that code are capabilities for July 1st of 2026, right? So what you're going to see in this presentation is the definition of done up to July 1st of 2024. Hey, we have the capabilities in place to meet the code. Are we pulling data right now? No, we're not doing that, but the capabilities are definitely in place, or, we're there. We're there for July 1st of 2024. Just an example of the July 1st, 2026 requirement is the capability to transfer digitized, for example, IEPs from records from the student domain across, right? That's a July 1st of 2026 requirement. Records, right? Student records, because we still currently exist in different types of SISs. So we are building the infrastructure to try to meet those requirements all the time, considering all the different disparate systems we have. So with that, if we could pull up the presentation, we'll get started. So different from this presentation is provided to the Finance Committee members and to the public in the Finance Committee every month. We do a deeper dive, especially since we were drawn so close to the July 1st, 2024 date. A little bit of a difference here is that we're putting the financial information up front so that you can get, in case you're asked for information on that. Yeah, will you tell my mom I'll call her back? Sorry. So, I am so sorry. My evaluation's an executive session, isn't it? Yes. Okay, so the USIMS is coming up here. All right, so here we go. What's different about the order of this presentation? I know, I can do the stand-up part. So, all right, thank you, ma'am. So, all right, so here's the topics, right? Here's the agenda. Here we go. There's domains, okay, within USIMS. There's 3 of them. There's the educator, student, and financial. So that's the next slide. Greg, help me out here, bud. There you go. Okay, so there's the domains, okay? So now what I'm going to do is change the order a bit from what we do in Finance Committee and talk to you about the funding that went into USIMS. So next slide. That's the roadmap. Okay, this is, the direction we were on, where we're headed, what we done, in a nutshell. Next slide. Okay, so here's the financials. So the USMS codes that you see there, so that number in front of USMS is the year, is the fiscal year, and USMS is state funding. The other codes that you see there are ESSER money or ARP money, okay? Before COVID, you can see that we did start using state funds a little bit, or went into state funds to start off the project back in 2018 timeframe. When COVID hit, we saw the opportunity to use ARP ESSER funds to get to what right is with the USIMS infrastructure and meet the code. So the board at the time voted to support using ARP ESSER money out of the state education agency's 10% set aside for this endeavor, for this purpose, for this project. So that's where you see the expenditures in the 2 codes related to ARP/ESSER. I'll call your attention, the public's and the board's attention, and the many legislators who are also interested in this, to 20 USMS, that is state funds. You can see that the 17,200,000 has not been touched yet. We haven't gotten it there. So no federal or state funds were harmed in the making of this USIMS. What it is that we did our due diligence in using the available funds, the federal funds, to get to where we are to meet the capability requirements of USIMS for July 1st of 2024. Now, with the additional requirements, one of the examples of many requirements that we have for July 1st of 2026, we have to start using that $17,200,000 of state funds. We have to use that because we've exhausted, and rightfully so, because we have to close on the ESSER ARP funds. So that's what you see in that chart in the lower right-hand corner. The pie chart, the bar graphs, those are important as well, but I think your key takeaway, if you have questions about the funding and what was spent and what type of fund source it came from, this is your ideal piece of information or slide. So next slide. You can see the trends there. We track dollar for dollar. We do that in every program through the great leadership of Deborah Jacobson, the staff here. They do a very good job of staying within budget, utilizing the funds for their intended purpose. Next slide. Same here, some more detail on our expenditure rates throughout the years or duration up to the July 1st, 2024, of what we're using. And then, of course, we'll track this going forward. Next slide. So here we go. What I would like to do is turn the time over to Katrina, and then each one of the project managers, or product owners, I should say, for the 3 domains, educator, student, and financial, will take you through those. The key takeaway from this, if you have to, or you get asked about, well, what difference has USIMS made? You will see on the slides that, and I asked the staff to do this, because the military does this, well, where were we before and where are we now, right? So you'll see before USIMS, after USIMS, but you'll see it broken down within the components, and I want to make sure too to tell you that this is not all inclusive. There's so much more that's available, but because of time and because the degree or amount of slides that we would have to use to put everything of the benefits that USIMS is providing or has the capabilities to provide in accordance with the law would just take up a lot of slide space and a lot more of your time. So Katrina, go ahead.
Thank you, Scott. Katrina Brinkley, Chief Product Owner and Program Manager for USIMS, which is the Utah Schools Information Management System, just in case y'all forget that because it's kind of long. But I am actually not going to take much of your time today. If I may, Chair, may I turn the time over to Tim Davis, our Product Owner for the Educator domain? Yeah, that one right there.
Good afternoon, Board. Tim Davis, Educator Domain Product Owner, State Employee for 24 years, 10 years here at USBE.
Could you hit your microphone, please?
Help me with sort of where you are in the system. I mean, what does product owner mean to those of us who are not so informed?
So product owner, we're responsible for the educator domain. So our primary responsibility under 53E-518 is we're consuming legacy system of Cactus. So we're responsible for taking. What's my job role?
Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
you're a private, let me just say this back to you. Are you a private consultant that's been hired to?
No, I'm an FTE.
Okay.
So, but the other 2 product owners are contractors.
Okay. Who are developing this for the state board, is that right?
Right.
Okay. Right-ish?
Yeah, I'm still former President Trump.
Do you want mine?
Okay,
So these terms, go ahead.
now you muted me on this for this.
It's not the most true you've ever been. The most right you've ever been.
Oh, I'm back.
Probably the
Okay.
most right you've ever been.
All right. So great question, because where's the money going, right? Tim is the product, so 3 domains,
Okay.
educator, finance, student.
Okay.
Tim is a state paid employee over the educator domain.
Okay.
Mark is a contractor for the student domain, and
Okay.
Dawn, who should be on, Dawn. Hey, Dawn, Texas, right? Hook 'em horns. They do. He's a contractor as well. So different pots of money pay for that, but yeah, Tim is our product owner that's state funded.
Helpful,
so-
didn't want to disrupt, but
Right.
that's really helpful.
But that's another piece to this too, is Dawn is a contractor who lives in Texas.
That's, we don't care.
Oh, okay, all right, okay, yeah.
Don't tell me about his family, Scott.
Member Lear, these are project management terms. Your,
Yes.
Scrum? Is it
Yes.
Scrum? They're Scrum terms, so they're just they are the managers, not just managers. But
Okay.
it's just the lingo.
And that's fine with me. I just wanted to know where they fit into the hierarchy of
If I may,
doing their
Chair,
jobs.
may I clarify, USIMS is using, we only have 3 USB FTEs on our project right now. We are supplementing that with a majority of contractors, but the long-term plan is to pull on USB FTEs over into USIMS. We just need to transfer some knowledge and some experience before we do so. And if I may turn the time back over to Tim. Okay. Thank you.
It's fine. So just as a reminder, Tim Davis, Chief Product, or not Chief Product Owner, that's Katrina. I just promoted myself. Product Owner for the educator domain. So this first slide that you see is when I transitioned from being on the Cactus help desk team to being a product owner. So what we've done in USIMS is the slide on your left is the world that would be if we didn't have USIMS. So For those of you who are around, we had Utah Interactive, which was a third-party application where the educator would go in and do individual transactions. There's 7 of them listed on this slide. So basically you would have to go in as an educator, you would have to do your ethics review, you would have to do your background check, you would have to get a copy of your license, which we call the duplicate license. You would, if you had an expired license, you would go to Utah Interactive to renew that. But then those of you that, or those educators that could renew their professional license, they could renew their license through Utah Interactive. And then university recommends, and the last thing you could update your contact information. But that was 7 individual transactions. You couldn't do it all at once. You'd have to, basically for every transaction, you'd have to type in either your educator ID, your date of birth, your social. With USIMS, we've basically consolidated all of those transactions into your USIMS account. So as an educator, they log into USIMS, they're presented a task checklist that has these items on it that they could do anytime they want. We would still be using those legacy systems, which, we have Cactus, the teacher lookup tool, University recommends, the Cactus application programming interface, also known as an API. Our LEAs use a remote desktop service and educator evals that back in the day was done through the RDS. Sorry, RDS was the remote desktop service, sorry. And then we have our Utah Education Network, which is a third-party provider that provides their educator data. And then we have Midas Uploads, Canvas, and Utah Interactive. And one of the issues with Legacy Cactus is it does not allow educators to be assigned to multiple LEAs, which was a state law that was passed, I believe, in 2002, something like that. I'd have to look, but that's the code is listed for you. So with USIMS, I already mentioned we took those 7 functionalities, put it inside it from Utah Interactive to USIMS. But then the educator domain becomes the system of record for educator data and processes. And then we will provide the following infrastructure functionality inside of USIMS. So you can do a new license you're awarded. You can do a license maintenance activities, renewals, data updates, etc. UPAC, I have what UPAC stands for on a different slide. I don't. Utah Professional Practices Advisory Commission, and then other educator business processes, and then on the slide or the column to the right are positive improvements. So some of these are still a work in progress. Some of them we have accomplished. So USIMS will improve the administrator's ability to effectively and efficiently manage their educators inside of the educator domain. USIMS infrastructure analyzes and interprets data sent LEAs for educator reporting. It's basically a one-stop shop for educators, LEAs, and administrators for educator licensing services. And then the big thing is in Cactus, most of you are aware, every year in June, we kick out the LEAs and educators for 2 weeks to do a rollover process. With USIMS, we won't be bound by that limitation. We can do things based off of school year, active start dates, end dates, those kind of things. And then the biggest thing is this removes legacy system integration and interoperability inadequacies. Next slide, please. So our July 1st, 2024 deadline, this is what we've accomplished this past year. So the Bureau of Criminal Investigation, BCI, background check and fingerprint process, we would call that the CBR, so Criminal Background Review. So that was mostly a manual process of background check and fingerprint data with BCI, your live scan locations here at USBE. Teaching and learning relies on the legacy system Cactus for that information, the CBR BCI results. I'm sorry, this is without the USIMS educator domain. And then your educator preparation program, formerly known as your university recommendation professional license. So that was a manual. So with educators who had expired licenses, to reconcile that license with a recommendation, it was a manual process. And recommends were done through the remote desktop service and through teaching and learning as needed. And last but not least, our Utah Professional Practices Advisory Commission puts their their investigations in an Excel spreadsheet. And there's the manual entry of that case creation in an Excel document. And then for positive improvements, So USIMS is a source of truth, and we move towards sunsetting the CBR BCI features in the legacy system. We provide an automated process that saves manual entry hours and errors. USB is now one of 4 state agencies that has real-time connection to our CBR BCI service, so that's updated 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The framework of educator license data lives inside of USIMS. Recommends for expired educator licenses are now done in USIMS and not manually in the legacy system. And remove inherent risk associated with Excel files being lost or corrupted. And then UPAC reliance on manual spreadsheet capture is reduced, data access and management is secured and audible within USIMS. Okay, thank you. And so our last slide here is through our kind of like what Scott's alluding to, things we're still working on. So this slide is we're with CBR, BCI, we're automating a wrap-back process is where educators who are eligible to renew their wrap-back, which is every 5 years. Right now that's a manual process through the BCI website, and so someone here at USB has to go in manually and either renew that subscription or they cancel the subscription. So we're working with BCI to automate that. We are also providing the information from CBR BCI directly to teaching and learning. And then we're working on assignments. So we've met recently with a lot of the LEAs to talk about how they handle assignments inside of their Cactus application, their SISs, their financial systems, their HR systems, their whiteboards, those things. So we're looking at incorporating the assignment process from Cactus inside of USIMS. And then we are also doing more, so it's actually on the next slides. Yeah.
Can you hold for just
Yes.
a minute? We've got a question for Member Carey. Member Carey?
Thank you, Vice Chair Hart. Yeah, just the BCR and the CBR and the BCI systems, they're both related to criminal background checks, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And could you explain the two different systems and why we need access to both?
So it's all housed under BCI. So when educators are obtaining their license here in the state of Utah, they have to have a background check, which is done through BCI. So BCI owns that process. So the educator or the individual will go and get their fingerprints done. Once the fingerprints are recorded, they search the record, and then the result, the teacher or the person passes the record. That data is then passed to us, so we know that they've passed that criminal background review and that they're eligible to have the professional license in order to teach in the state of Utah.
And so with this real-time access, then we are getting the latest information available on that system?
Yes. And so sorry.
No, please.
So if, for example, if we get a cleared record and something happens to, some new information has popped up, BCI gives us a status of like not cleared, and then we can change that, and then it's passed to TNL, so they have that, and UPAC as well, so they have that information in real time.
Thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Do we facilitate the individual LEAs having access to that, or do they do that through a separate channel?
Right now, it's through a separate channel. It's just through teaching. So teaching and learning is right now the only one authorized to have the CBR BCI results. One of the things we're working on is we are going to provide the tracked or not tracked status when you're in the wrap-back process, and so that kind of informs the LEAs that they know the educators within the cleared process system.
So we give LEAs the ability to use wrap-back?
No, so inside of USIMS, we'll provide
Okay,
the
so
status
it's going
of,
to be inside
yes, so we'll
USIMS.
be providing the status of tracked or not tracked, which
Okay.
it hopefully we'll educate them, train them to know that it means that their record's cleared. But because we're constrained by BCI requirements of who we can provide the background check to.
Okay.
The educator can request that the information is cloned. And so that was just recently done, so that will be part of future enhancements inside of USIMS.
This is I don't know, you probably hate this question. When does Cactus get turned off, like drop kicked?
It's a great question. So the way we're doing things is we're running things in parallel. So as we're assuming those features and functionality inside of USIMS and we get stakeholder buy-off that everything's working as intended, then we can start turning off those. We can't just turn off Cactus because it's so intertangled, unfortunately.
Yeah,
I probably
I know.
that's not the answer you want to hear. But
I know.
Cactus data is sent to a lot of subsystems. So
Okay.
I think it's in this chart, the spaghetti chart of
So we still don't know.
the goal is to within the next 2 years. But, yes, but pieces are being dropped off. So actually, like on the next, so like when we talk about, so this slide, I'll just summarize. So this is kind of our current status. Just for board transparency, at one time the educator domain was in a red status just due to the issues we were having with our previous work with the Utah Interactive Consumption and our progress being made towards our goal. But then we got together, huddled, and we quickly turned things around and we're in a green status and we're moving fast and furious towards our deliverables for the future, but we were able to accomplish our July 1st, 2024 deliverables. 25, thank you. So this is kind of our roadmap, our goals for July 1st, 2025. So as I mentioned earlier, so just quickly I'll highlight things. Our Bureau of Criminal Investigation, BCI, the background check and fingerprint process, our big things, like I mentioned, is automating the RATBAC process, providing the CBR BCI results to teaching and learning so that they don't have to go through the BCI system and or rely on legacy Cactus, and then providing the LEAs, the tracked or not tracked. Then assignments, as I mentioned, the big thing is we want to provide a mechanism where LEAs, SISs can provide assignment information with USIMS to eliminate manual dual entry. And then we also want to provide a mechanism where teaching and learning can manage those assignment qualifications inside of USIMS, and that would subset some Cactus features. We have a federal or state requirement where we have to modify a renewal form process with our workflow on USIMS, so that's why that bullet's there. And then as I mentioned earlier with the Utah Professional Practice Advisory Commission, we're looking at integrating the UPAC hearing process. So later today when you guys meet with Ben, Director Rasmussen, and you guys determine your investigations for those educators who've done something that needs corrective action, we're looking at incorporating your decision-making process into what they do in the legacy system inside of USIMS. Next slide, please. And then for those of you who are not aware, so we're talking about sunsetting legacy or Cactus applications. Some of you might know it as the University Recommend process. What we call it is the Educator Preparation Program. So that's those educators, individuals who've gone through a college program here in the state of Utah, and they've graduated and they've been recommended to be an educator. So we've launched that into production. We have currently 4 universities that are using that application, and we've had a few results. It's less than 10, but most of the reason why is most universities, their program won't complete until December, and then we'll see those numbers increase. So those universities right now are Westminster, Rocky Mountain, University of Utah, and Utah Tech. Once we've seen the data and see how the system responds, we'll move to our second phase of incorporating Utah Valley and Weber. And the phase 3 is basically our larger universities who have large programs for the educator prep program. And the reason why we're saving them for last is because we're going to treat them individually so we don't break them, the system, or their processes. And then we'll be incorporating any changes as needed throughout that process. But by July 1st, 2025, the goal is to have every university here using the USIMS educator prep program, and then we can sunset that program inside of Cactus. And then we will be consuming a third-party provider. So earlier I mentioned Utah Education Network. So Utah Education Network has issues with keeping that information up to date, following best coding practices, and they've asked us to take over that, providing that information inside of USIMS. And so that's what we hope to tackle next spring. And then last 2 is, so we have the LEA school directory. So for those of you, basically what that means is just the maintenance of opening LEAs, closing LEAs, changing that information as needed. And then we have our LEA-specific licenses is not part of USIMS, so that would be incorporating that license type inside of USIMS. And then last but not least, or two more bullets, sorry, we have our educator licensing USIMS data reporting. So we actually demonstrated part of this on Tuesday in the Focus Working Group, which some of you are invited to. Basically, so everything that the educator can do inside of USIMS, we're providing a report to teaching and learning so they can see like how many people have accounts, what step they're on, what they've done, like if they've renewed, if they've completed an ethics review, if they printed a license, if they obtained the background check, if they've acknowledged their fingerprint instructions, those kind of things. And the last item is as we've developed the features and functionality in USIMS, we've acquired some tech debt. And this is just for transparency purposes that we acknowledge that we want to improve our technical debt that we've kind of not necessarily neglected, but we've due to priorities, though it's just low on the priority list, but we acknowledge that these are things we need to do.
Ma'am, at your direction, we'll move on to the student domain. Okay, so USIMS, so that slide on this one should say without USIMS student domain, with USIMS student domain, and the positive improvements for the board's review. Next slide. So then on this next slide, which I'm having trouble moving mine, sorry. So what student domains improve is the backpack capability. So the student achievement backpack is in the code. It's required. And we have the capabilities now to meet the code and the requirements of the student backpack. So without USIMS student domain and with USIMS student domain specific to the backpack and positive improvements for your review. Next slide. So the USIMS student current and upcoming work. So this is the student domain. Very important key takeaways from here is, as I said, it's an ongoing process, a perpetual process, and there are deliverables that are required by code in the out years, 2025 and 2026. I'll just pause here because I do want to recognize program owner or project or product owner, Mark Waddups, for any additional key informations or takeaways to the board and to the public on the USIMS domain, student domain. Mark?
Thank you. Mark Waddups, product owner for student domain.
Next
for
slide.
USIMS.
Go to the next slide so you can talk to the student backpack. My bad. Go ahead.
Yeah, so just to sum up for time, this is, as Deputy Superintendent Jones explained, per 53E-3-511, which is specific to the student backpack. This is the data that last year we created the capability, and this year it's all about making sure we can get real student data so we can start seeing the value of that, of what we built last year. Next slide, please. And then in addition to that, we're looking to expand data as well. So there was a reference earlier to IEP plans and the ability to be able to move that. That's something that we're starting to address this year, or as part of the scope for 2025. We're also looking at providing WIDA scores, as well as 504 plans and accommodations, and based off of priorities and the progress we make, we'll do that. The priority for expanding data is definitely IEP. And we're excited because we feel like the same process that we use for that could be used for, say, 504 plans and accommodations. Next slide, please. And here, this is just calling out the enabling functionality to allow us to share that information from one LEA to another. So if Johnny's moving from one LEA to another, the whole purpose is to make sure that that data moves with them, so that if Johnny or Sarah is now coming to the new LEA in a new school, that new LEA has access to just the data that they need in order to help transition them into the proper programs, and also to help them acclimate instead of, waiting a month or 6 weeks or even 2 months before their cumulative file, as it's called, makes it to the new LEA. That's basically the sum of that.
Right. Sorry, Mark. So that concludes the student domain. Subject to that, I'll move to the finance domain. So what USIM's finance domain improves, you see, orient you and the public to without USIM's finance, so the before, and now the after capabilities that we have with USIM's finance and the positive improvements. Now, again, these are not all inclusive of all the positive improvements out there. We're just trying to highlight some of the key aspects of the finance domain in relation to meeting the requirements of the code July 1st of 2024. Next slide, please. So I would like to call your attention to Don, or your direction, Madam Chair. Don is with us from Texas. He'll just do the current and upcoming work and the definition of done on the finance pages. Don?
Thank you, Deputy Superintendent Jones. Don Moody, USIM's finance product owner. Just want to highlight quickly a couple of the recent wins that the finance team has completed. We're actively coordinating with 6 different vendors used at many of the LEAs here in Utah. We've actually provided them with individual credentials for how they can submit budget and actual information to USIMS. We have confirmed with multiple vendors that they can submit accounts using USIMS to USBE. And we've just been able to confirm that here over the last few weeks, and confirming the functionality for USIMS. We've also shared underlying that information. We have with the focus working group, we have published the ability to search for accounts and account combinations rules related to financial budget and revenue transactions. We've included that we've shared that with the focus working group, and we're working to publish that information to the large LEA audience, to all LEAs. We've also been able to gathering that feedback. As I mentioned, a big portion of our work related to the finance API. As we're automating budget and actual information, we are doing a lot of coordination with those external vendors. They've been very good about providing us different feedback. A couple of the vendors, almost too much feedback, but we're making sure to kind of evaluate all that feedback and prioritize. Okay, here's what we need to do to make sure that we're spending the right amount of time and resources to optimize in a fiscally responsible manner to optimize the USIMS Finance API. And like I said, we've allowed USBE, we're gathering feedback. We've shared this with kind of with the different LEAs that participate in the focus working group, and we're sharing this information right now, working to share this with all of the LEAs within the state of Utah. Right now, the finance domain is in a green status. I don't have like issues necessarily, but it's just the continued coordination with those vendors is always something. That's USB does not have control over what the vendors do. So there's a lot of conversations back and forth on what is and is not in scope, what they can and cannot provide.
Next slide, please. So here's the USIMS FY25 definition of done. Don, anything on this one?
Just real quickly, I mean, we've actually completed a lot of that third bullet on the managing accounts and combinations. We're just finishing up the UI, working to share that with the accounts here in the next few weeks with USBE. We're continuing to improve the finance API. And then we'll be able to focus over the next few months on the indirect cost component for those actual submissions.
Thank you. So next slide, Madam Chair, here's the upcoming events for situational awareness. Again, we've met the requirements of the July 1st, 2024 deadlines to demonstrate capabilities. We're on path or on target for the July 1st, 2025 and July 1st, 2026 as required by code and or rule. And these dates or upcoming events is just additional steps on how to get there. Subject to any questions or concerns, ma'am, this concludes the USIMS update to the board. And I plan on taking just as long for PEA next week, so.
They will.
No, it'll be
They will
shorter.
enjoy that. I'm
Yes,
quite sure.
it'll be shorter. But ma'am, I really do, in all seriousness, need to make sure that, you know, if board members have questions or concerns or any kind of issues, or you're hearing things or seeing things, then tell me, right? Let me know. We'll answer your questions. We're transparent on this. We don't have anything to hide. It's making a difference out there. It's been tough. There's still some things we got to work through, obviously, but we will get to what right is and in accordance with the law and the code. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. And it's exciting. So thank you, team, for being here.
So,
and
ma'am, there's
thanks.
also the seats piece, and I can
Oh.
cover that real quick. So
Would-
if we can pull that up,
Okay.
too, because there does seem to be some
There is some
concerns.
concern.
I've heard the statement that we have done nothing on seats. That is not true.
Okay.
And I will demonstrate that accordingly with the first slide. These are particulars that we've accomplished with seats since, or, you know, as a result of concerns that were brought to us with the particular system. Now, the full rewrite or the full redoing of seats was what was put on hold due to two factors. One, the consideration of one SIS. It makes no point to invest time, effort, and money into what amounts to an SIS of its own, which is seats. And the second one was what was talked about earlier with the legislative intent coming out of the legislative session to privatize the private and homeschool segments of it too. So the vendor would have to bring their own system to manage those as part of the RFP process. However, there does seem to still be some confusion that everything related to seats was put on hold. That is not correct. As you can see, and I'll orient the public, and hopefully some other individuals are listening to this on the seats update. On the left-hand side, we have been working on seats. We have been making corrections or updates to it. What we did not do is the complete, full takedown and rewrite of seats that was intended to be done as part of the overall USIMS project. But again, because of the two other developing situations on the ground that I just described, that particular piece was put on hold. And I would encourage anyone who says that parents are having access problems or to call me directly and let me know what that is, because I only want to help. I only want to help to make sure that all these things that we're hearing and all the problems with seats, we can try to correct and try to sustain. The things, though, the requirements that are wanted of seats would take a complete rewrite. So, you know, we have held on that complete rewrite for the two reasons I gave you. Next slide, please. So here's the future of seats pending policy decisions or things like that. Where staff will support the systems, will make the systems support whatever direction we receive from the legislature and or the board. So subject to any questions or concerns, ma'am, that concludes the seats portion of the overall update to USIMS.
Thank you. Are you planning on including that in your USIMS presentation
I
to
am. Yes,
PEA?
ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. I see none. And board members, if you have any questions, please just call or email our lovely team. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your patience.
Yay.
Thank you.